So a very warm, welcome to all of you who are attending right from where the sun rises. It's still not risen in New Zealand so far. And I have Gareth from New Zealand, and thank you so much. It's like a midnight thing for him. And it's so special for us that Gareth, is waking up for all of us from New Zealand and doing this webinar, which is a very precious webinar because we don't know what is this disciplined agile value stream. And Gareth is one of the privileged few across the world who knows about it. So we are going to hear about disciplined agile value stream from Gareth. Gareth is one agile coach for more than 20 years of experience, a seasoned professional. And I was going through his profile, and it was very interesting. He's worked with so many organizations to implement agile. I think he has that wealth of knowledge spread across different agile practices and different agile methodologies. And he is one of the key consultants of disciplined agile. So, and one of the things I noticed in his profile, which is, he's an endurance. He's a triathlete. And that's an endurance sport. I think that's awesome. And I'm not that a cricket fan, but I was watching the ICICI final between New Zealand and India. And yesterday, by the way, Gareth, they won the match. Okay, now, Gareth doesn't know that. Okay, they beat India. Okay, almost. Okay, they played really nice. And coincidence that you are taking the webinar from New Zealand for us today. So a warm welcome, Gareth. Thank you so much once again. And we are all ears for your value stream disciplined agile webinar on. We'd like to know more about it. So all over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Ashish. So yeah, you're right. So it's a relatively new phrase. It's a new thing that I've been working with a few people on for about a year now. And my intent here is to share it with you so that it isn't only a few people who know this, and maybe you can take some ideas away of this. So sure. For about the next 40 minutes, I'm going to talk about an overview of the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant, how it's an extension of the Disciplined Agile itself, and how it may help in your organization. It's also known as DA Flex. Before we go into it, I just want to make an acknowledgement of Al Shalloway. He's based in California at the moment. So he spends a lot of time in Seattle in the US. And he's a director of thought leadership of Agile at Scale programs for the Project Management Institute. He was the founder of Net Objectives and CEO prior to the PMI acquiring it about 18 months ago. And he was also co-founder of the Lean Kanban University with David Anderson, and he's contributed to the Scale Agile framework. So he is a thought leader, and he's been mentoring me for around about a year now. And I've learned quite a lot from him. So much of what I'm going to share with you today, I've learned from Al. So what he's been involved with developing involving Flex before it was acquired, is about 16 years of work of his time. And then in the last 12 months, he's brought consultants from around the world to help him develop a workshop, a training course to share his knowledge. And you can see there he's quite a prolific writer as well. Those are some of the books he's written. So very briefly, who I am. Yes, I'm a product development professional. I coach teams. I help organizations, mainly in Australia and New Zealand, using Agile and Lean techniques. My background is in manufacturing. So I worked at Sony 25 years ago. So I learned about Kanban and Lean manufacturing from Sony. And I've been an Agile coach, consulting for about 10 years, and I was a project manager for 15 years before that. And yes, I do triathlon. I represent New Zealand. I'm going to the World Ironman Champs in Hawaii later this year. Fingers crossed it actually happens. You can also follow me. I'm quite prolific on LinkedIn, and I have a YouTube channel. So you just Google my name, you can find it. So that's very briefly who I am. So today, the main topics in the next 40 minutes are going to be talking about value streams themselves and the inherent problem that we see with value streams. We're going to talk about utilization versus throughput, the minimum business increment, the MBI, which is not an MVP, and I'll explain the difference. I will cover a little bit about systems thinking, and then when we've covered those concepts, I will talk about how Flex attends to these and may help organizations continually improve. So, the first question is, what is a DA value stream consultant? Before that, let's think, what is Disciplined Agile? Well, DA was created around about 10 years ago by Scott Ambler and Mark Lyons, and it is not a framework. It's not like Scrum or SAFe or less. It's a toolbox of all of the different practices that you may be able to use, and then a pragmatic way to approach applying them in your context. So it has its own principles, and it's an extension of the Agile Manifesto, and it encompasses everything you may have heard with Kanban and Scrum and SAFe. That's what Disciplined Agile is, and DA was also acquired by the PMI. So what we're doing is we're bringing Disciplined Agile together with Flex, which is what NetObjectives created. It's based on the job task analysis for a person attempting to improve an organization's ability to create value. Remember, that's what all organizations do. They are inherently there to create value for the customers. And so the idea of DA Flex is, how can we enhance the way we improve value and create value? It's the system that supports this person so that the consultant helps the end-to-end flow of the work. And the system to help that consultant is known as Flex. And that's short for Flow for Enterprise Transformation. Well, not quite, but Flex is easier to remember. The DA value stream consultant teaches the combination of responsibilities and how to achieve them. So, in fact, today I was talking to a client and they asked me if I could help them in the context of being an enterprise agile coach. And I said I prefer now being called a value stream consultant because it encompasses more than just agile. It thinks about systems thinking and theory of constraints and lean, and also agile, but things like leadership as well. So the value stream consultant is somebody who looks at the entire end-to-end flow of the work through the organization. Disciplined Agile is about what is needed in our particular theories. So we need to know the theory and we need to practice the theory with an experimental mindset because things may have to be adjusted. It's agnostic of any particular framework. So it may use techniques from XP or Scrum, or if you're not a technology company, you can still use it. You don't have to use the software tools. But it attends to the natural laws of knowledge work. And we know lots of our traditional management has been grounded in scientific management and 100 or so years of industrial management. And in knowledge work, we have to manage slightly different. DA focuses on what an organization wants to accomplish. It identifies the challenges in the way and how to overcome them. So this is basic theory of constraints. If you're familiar with Eli Goldratt and the work he did in his book, The Goal, or the more recent book, The Choice, which informs this material, it's looking at those constraints, which is slowing the flow of value down, and how might we improve that? It doesn't start with practices. So if you look at Scrum, Scrum has a tendency to focus on the practices first, and then develop the mindset off the back of that. And even the Toyota Kata system does that. But in DA Flex, it focuses directly on the results and the organization wants to achieve. It attends to their situation and creates an improvement backlog for them. And that's an important thing. We're going to look right at the end at creating an improvement backlog. So let's consider an organizational structure. So everybody on this webinar tonight, you're all in different companies, but I can guarantee most of your companies will be structured something like this. So you'll have different departments. You may have HR and legal, sales, marketing, product development, and support. And each one of those will have a general manager in charge. And that general manager will have a budget, a P&L perhaps, and will be responsible for maximizing the efficiency of those people in their care. And that comes through management and leadership. And that's traditionally how companies have been working for 150 years now. What we need to do is focus on people being utilized, and we always look at maximizing that utilization, because if you're paying for somebody, you want to get value for money out of that. So we need people to be productive, and we need people to do quality work so we don't have to do things twice, and we need people to work on the right things because it's wasteful. Being highly efficient is something that we need not do in the end. That was Peter Drucker. The nature of our work, though, is slightly different to the nature of the way we manage the people. It starts with customers, it gets approved by managers, and it flows through the organization. You can see that purple arrows. And it starts with the customers with a problem, and it goes through sales and marketing, and then we develop the solution, we support it, and then deliver it to the customers. Product managers and managers in general are often in conflict with one another. They are focusing on their local silo, their vertical. And if you optimize locally, sometimes you can sub-optimize globally. And that means that sometimes there could be tension between managers. They could be fighting for resources or for budget. And there may not be a great relationship between the managers. And that's something in any organization, we need to look at. Also, the people doing the work sometimes get confused because they get mixed messages. There's a different emphasis from, say, a chief customer officer to a chief product officer, and it might be slight and nuanced, but the developers can get confused. And this is going to cause anxiety and stress at the developer level. This is also waste. And this happens many, many times. So we don't just have one customer, and any customer doesn't just want one thing. So we've got all these different flows of work through the business, and everything needs an approval by a more senior person. And this is the inherent problem that we're facing. See, we manage our people this way, but the work flows this way. The value flows left to right through the company, but we manage top to bottom. To solve this, we must shift our attention from managing our people to managing the value stream. So the essence is not on changing the organization from the bottom up, like Scrum does, or from the top down, like SAFe does. It's instead attending to the entire value stream and looking at where the value flows and where the value flow is being held up. We must shift our focus to the value stream. No one is managing the value. Everybody's too busy managing the people. And you know, if we create the right environment for the people can manage themselves if they know why we're doing the work and how to create the value. We must expand our view of Agile to include the entire enterprise. One thing I've had an experience of, especially with some organizations, is they'll ask me to come in as an Agile consultant, an Agile coach, and they'll say, look, our delivery teams are not going fast enough. Can you just work with them and improve their throughput? So I do that. I do the best I can, and we sometimes get great teams. But the problem is the product teams are still slow at delivering the requirements. And on the delivery side, they're still slow. So ultimately, the customer doesn't notice that we've got rockstar Scrum teams because I'm just focusing on the parts. And sometimes because of that, I create queues and I create stress because I'm optimizing the local. So what we really need to do is look at the end-to-end, the entire value stream. Now, what is a value stream? What's the textbook definition of a value stream? Well, it's the set of actions that take place to add value to a customer from the initial request through to the realization of value by the customer. Now, when I say customer here, it could be internal or external. And that initial request, it might be something that the customer don't even know that they need. And so this is where techniques like design thinking are important to understand a customer's behavior, which is part of the value stream, and then creating value for the customer that they go, wow, you've solved a problem for me I didn't even know I had. But that's the value stream. The important thing is that the value stream always begins and ends with the customer. It's all of the customer could be internal or external. The value stream is the work, it's not the people doing the work. So if you're familiar with SAFe, you'll know that value streams, the phrase value stream has been quite prolific there, but many organizations tend to interpret that as a group, as a department. If you're familiar with the Spotify model, we have tribes. And again, that's really departmental rather than where the work flows, sometimes when people implement it. So what we're really looking at here is focusing on the work, not necessarily the people. We want to try and create an organization where cultures allow for people to self-organize. How often does work wait? Well, let's have a look at this value stream again. Here's a bit of wait. Here's some more waiting. Back to the customer, over to somebody in marketing and product management, a bit of wait. Oh, we've got to get an approval, somebody sign it off, a bit more waiting, and so on, and so on. This happens quite a lot, right? So there's a bank I was working at once, and we did a Google design sprint for a change in the customer experience for new customers to the bank. And within a week, we managed to get loads of ideas of how the first 100 days experience in the bank could be enhanced. So all we need now is a team and a product owner, and off we go, and we can do it. The problem was at this bank, it took 3 months to get the budget and to get the team assembled. So it didn't matter that it only took us a week to find out what the problem was to be solved. It still took a long time before we even started considering how to solve that problem. So this is a fundamental problem, and my personal experience in New Zealand is it's prolific. So how much time is this a piece of work moving forward, and how much of this time is waiting for something else to be done? How would you know? That's the worst question, right? Because all of these delays which may be building up, you may be saying, we're waiting for sign off in legal, or we're waiting for marketing to approve, but no one actually knows the end-to-end, all of the stack up of delays. And I'd like to make reference to a book called Lean Product Development Flow by Don Reinertsen. And in that, he says, if you're going to measure anything, measure cost of delay, because it's cost of delay that's going to become exponential if it becomes too long. In most companies, nobody's managing this. Nobody's aware of this. We may know anecdotally around us that there's delays happening, but nobody's measuring the entire value stream delay. There is a technique called value stream mapping. It's something I've done for years, and I think it was from the Toyota production system. And in value stream mapping, what you do is you visualize the end-to-end. You look at where the value is created, and then you look at all of those little wait times. And then you can look at each of those wait times and say, which one can we fix? Which is the constraint? Where's the bottleneck? Now, this applies in knowledge work, even though I took it from manufacturing. But in manufacturing, that's what we did all the time. We would always look for, where is this delay? Where is the bottleneck? And how can we limit that bottleneck? So time to market is one reason. And in fact, the Standish Group issued a report called the Chaos Report about 5 years ago now. And they said the biggest cause of failure of projects is what's known as decision latency, so decision delay. So there's many different types of delays, but one delay in particular is decision delay. So what happens when work gets delayed? It gets delayed between getting the requirements and using them. So that case of the bank, it's when two groups are out of sync. So maybe somebody's ready to deliver, but they're waiting for somebody else to have their component ready to integrate. It could be introducing an error and detecting it. So maybe you write a bug into a code, but because you don't test it until much further down the track, that delay is a waste because the rework it's a compound cost as the distance away from when that defect was created to when it was detected. And just waiting for someone. So all of these wait times, and every time there's a wait, that's waste. Removing delays in a value stream is critical in order to reduce the extra work that they create. How does delays create extra work? Well, if something takes much longer, and you're in an organization that you know that it's going to take a long time for this to be delivered, when you're asked for those requirements, you're likely to add every single possible requirement that you may possibly need, because you know as soon as you've asked for those requirements, it's going to be too long to get new requirements in. DAVSC is a value stream management workshop. It's defining the role for managing the value streams in an organization. So let's look at queues now. Queue time is another thing. It's a measure that Don Reinertsen suggests. And here's a road. It could be pretty much anywhere in the world. I assume many roads are like this in India. And it looks pretty well utilized to me. Looks pretty well nice and efficient. We're getting full use of our tarmac out of that road. But wait, there's a spot here and there's another spot there. And this is how we operate our people. So we maximize the utilization of people because we can't have people sat idle. That seems inefficient and wasteful. The problem is if you've had an experience of a road like this, how does it feel? How fast are you going? And chances are you're either stationary or moving very slow, and it's hard work as well. So what we really want to do is focus on throughput. And so here's a nice, easy motorway somewhere, a freeway, and it's not fully utilized. It looks probably less than 5% utilized there, but the throughput is really fast. Now, there's obviously a sweet spot somewhere between one and the other. We can't afford to have companies where people are sat idle for 95% of the time. And the rule of thumb, I would say, would be in and around 80%. So there's a little bit of slack time and you've got the throughput. Anything above 80%, and you'll start to see that throughput starts to slow down because queues will start forming. And so the first thing to focus on is activation over utilization. And we want to measure throughput. We don't want to measure efficiency because efficiency will cause that picture on the left. We manage utilization in lean management, and this is all from lean thinking. This is from Toyota and theory of constraints. So how might we be able to do this? Well, another thing to look at in traditional project management is we would maybe complete all of the requirements, the design would be completed, then the data layer, and so on until we integrate right at the end. And the value is only created when everything's put together and we've got something we can sell. Now, this case here is an extreme example, and it's probably not how people work anymore. It possibly was 30 or 40 years ago. This is how NASA created the Apollo program. And William Royce, when he wrote the book on waterfall, he explained that this waterfall sequence of events is how NASA work. But most people, especially in IT, we don't work purely like that now. There is a little bit of overlap. But we want to try and tend away from this, because if you get to the integration and you've done all of this work and you suddenly realize there's a problem, an error, or the customer doesn't want it, it's too late. And you have now delivered no value, but you've spent a lot of money on it. It's too late to pivot. And requirements tend to be piled on and poorly prioritized and have long delivery cycles. So I said before about the problem with people creating requirements is if they know things are going to take a long time and be delayed, they're going to stack in loads of requirements, which is going to make the whole situation worse. They're going to be poorly prioritized because it's difficult to predict one item from another. What should we work on first? And often, if you've got 3 different clients, you're actually working on 3 different things at once, which is even worse because you're context switching. One easy way to prioritize is to consider cost of delay, because then you can make an economic decision between A and B and which one to do first. And then ideally you would focus on one thing at a time. You wouldn't work on everything at once. And this is called minimizing work in process. You may have heard minimize work in progress, but work in process means when the work is actually in the value stream, when it's waiting and there's value being gathered. So these delivery cycles become longer and longer. So what we really want to do is try and address this. A different way is to slice the work. So we deliver a little piece of value first, and there's some more value and some more value. And every time we're integrating. So these items of value are something that the customer can actually use. And we could even at some point say, we don't want to spend any more money. Oh, excuse me. So here you see that value is delivered. And we may not deliver some of these. I've noticed there's a chat channel and there's a Q&A. If you'd like to ask any questions or make any comments as we go along, feel free to add in there. I'm just scanning the chat box. And also, if you would like to ask Q&As, we will have 10 minutes Q&A at the end. So what are these risks? We'll compare those 2 different cases where we add all of the requirements and do a sequential process where we struggle to pivot at the end, or that incremental iterative approach. Look at the degree of risk. If we complete the system at once, we can end up with a degree of risk being relatively high compared to the incremental approach. Eli Goldratt says often reducing the batch size is all it takes to bring a system back into control. So the theory goes that if you reduce the batch size then and have a pull system, the throughput will go up and the delays will go down. And so having that incremental approach to delivering value is reducing batch size. Delivering incrementally is not a reason to deliver less. It's a reason to deliver sooner. One thing I often hear is people saying we're agile now, we're working faster. And that's also not true. It's not about trying to work faster. It's about delivering value sooner. And you deliver value sooner by doing less of the ineffective work and focusing on the delays. Our objective ultimately is about business agility. Business agility, the definition by the PMI, there are many different definitions, is the ability to realize the highest business value in a shorter amount of time, consistently, sustainably, and with high quality. So that's not peaks of high intensive work. It's a sustainable pace, and it's not churning out low quality work as well. It has to be high quality. I'm just going to cover lean principles again. So we attend to the delays in workflow and interactions in the value stream. We remove delays. We make everything visible, because remember, if you can't see it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you can't improve it. And finally, we focus on the workflow, the value stream itself. Value stream management is a way to achieve business agility, to move value more quickly, to realize value. Because if you've got work in the system, work in process, you've invested money on that. And if you can't sell it, that's a liability on your general ledger. You spent money on something you can't sell, that's a liability. So what we want to try and do is realize value that the end customer can consume that value as soon as possible. This reduces risk as well, because in smaller batch sizes, we have faster feedback loops. So if we're not quite delivering what the customer needs, we can adjust. Increasing business agility requires looking at the entire value stream. So we want to look at the entire system, not just the teams themselves. This lets everyone see how they relate to one another. It enables people to see the entire system and visualize the entire system, and then they can improve and moderate the flow of work all the way through. This will ultimately shorten the time from concept to consumption. Systems thinking. Now, the definition of systems thinking is a holistic approach to analysis that focuses on the way a system's constituent parts interrelate and how systems work over time and within the context of the larger system. To me, that's a lot of words. So I'm going to give you an example of what system thinking actually means. Here's an airplane. Now, in the chat box, I'd like you to tell me what you think causes it to fly. Which part of the plane causes it to fly? So if you just want to throw onto the chat box, where do you think the plane flies? Wings, yeah, wings definitely, but without any jets, the wings are just going to sit on the tarmac. So what else do we need? The design of the wing, the engine, yeah. So we've got an aircraft, it's got an engine and wings, but it's got no fuselage. The propellers, yes. We need a pilot, we need fuel, we need air traffic control. Yeah, exactly, Sarah. That's the whole thing. It's not, and no part of the plane can fly. It's the system, it's the interaction of the plane that enables it to fly. You may wish to Google Russ Aikoff. He's got a video on YouTube and he explains it perfectly. And the point of wings, the plane, is you could optimize part of the plane, but it doesn't necessarily make it any faster. And you couldn't. So the range of say a Boeing 737 is about 5,000 kilometers, and I think the fuel is 26,000 liters or something like that. If we were to put 260,000 liters in an aircraft, it doesn't give it a range of 50,000 kilometers because it'd be so heavy it couldn't get off the ground. So you have to consider the entire system and optimize systemically. That's the point of systems thinking. When we look at organizations, often we look locally, and if you try and optimize locally, you will sub-optimize globally. So systems work as a whole. Improving one part may degrade the performance of the whole. Local optimizations don't always deliver system-wide improvements. And the problem, if you look at the inherent problem, is all of those general managers are only trying to optimize their local sphere. So that was systems thinking. Next, I'm going to talk about minimum viable products. You may be familiar with this. It was popularized by Eric Ries in his book, Lean Startup. It was first coined by Frank Robson 10 years prior to that. And I don't know about where you work, but it's a very common phrase where I've been working in the tech sector in New Zealand. And what people usually mean by minimum viable product now is that we need to deliver X amount of value to the customer by this date. That's our MVP. But that's not what Eric Ries meant. He meant it was it's to validate a leap of faith assumption. We think a customer might want this product. How might we create a prototype in order to validate that assumption? So an MVP is the smallest piece of work to be used to validate a hypothesis of a potential product. So it's of a potential future product, not an existing product. An MVP is geared towards initial products where we want to verify that it's viable. MVPs are usually built by a small team that can pivot. So MVPs are great for startups in Silicon Valley. It could be a larger company who wants to try something new and they start off a small team, but it's not a collection of teams who have to coordinate, because that's too complex to prototype rapidly. So that's the minimum viable product. That's the definition. So we want to use the right tool for the right job. Sometimes an MVP is the right job, but sometimes it isn't. What do you use when you are an established company? It's an enhancement to an existing product or service, and it's multiple teams that are required to build it, and they are not aligned. So this is a different scale, it's a different maturity, and it's not a startup we're talking about. This is not an MVP. And what I would encourage you, if you take nothing away from this webinar tonight, is to be very self-aware when you use the phrase MVP. So instead, I'm going to introduce something else called the Minimum Business Increment, and this is used in Flex. An MBI is still small. It's the smallest increment that we can create for which value can be realized by an external or internal customer. So it's a container of everything that we need, not just the feature, but everything that wraps around the feature, including the infrastructure, the material, all of the collateral that is needed to deliver consumable value. Our focus is on minimum valuable unit, and the challenge is to make that batch size as small as possible. And it is a challenge, it's not easy. If you look at SAFe, they have initiatives and epics. We believe epics are too large, and there might be a better way to slice epics into MBIs. And in fact, Flex can work with SAFe. So if you're in a scaled agile environment, you can use Flex, and then you'd use the MBI to see the flow of work through and to slice it slightly differently. A feature is often insufficient, or user story is definitely insufficient. So an MBI sits somewhere between a feature and an epic. The purpose of an MBI is not doing less. It's about delivering value sooner. So likely is you might do less because you get realized value to the customer sooner. But the essence of an MBI is not just to make it smaller, it's to deliver value sooner. MBIs also include all of the actions required to manifest value by the customer, including marketing and support and the operations and everything that you need. So you'd have a series of MBIs that are often required to achieve the desired function to implement an initiative. And we'd build and deliver them incrementally. So we would continually deliver MBIs to the customer until the customer is satisfied. That gives you the opportunity to pivot. And another thing from Lean Startup is the definition of what a pivot is. A pivot is a change in strategy when the vision remains the same. So you're still going to the same goal, but then you take a different strategic approach to it. And having that incremental approach enables you to pivot regularly. This reduces waste as well. This is how MBIs enable business agility. And the thing that I've noticed in the value stream workshop and the work that I've done with Al Shalloway is everything surrounds the idea of the MBI. So I would encourage you to consider using MBI where people often use MVP. DAVSC has MBIs. Other popular approaches do not use them. Patterns in value streams. So from a conceptual point of view, value streams from different companies, even in different industries, are surprisingly similar. And I've experienced this. So I've worked in the banking sector and in the fintech, but I'm currently working for a healthcare company. And it's a completely different industry, different people. But the same kind of problems arise and the same kind of flow of work happens as well. So while every company is unique, there are going to be elements of every value stream which is consistent. And because of that, we can maybe have a look at some changes in some industries that can benefit others. Companies have products or services that they need to develop, improve, or change, and so they could undertake work expecting value in return. Every company does that. Organizations that have additional constraints, such as regulations or specialist hardware, will have similar idealized value streams, but with added factors to which to attend. So this healthcare company that I work on, obviously they have different things to consider than a banking company that has financial things to consider. So now I've given you all of the concepts that build into Flex. I'm going to introduce Flex itself. It stands for Flow for Enterprise Transformation. The DA Flex approach is to first assess the idealized value stream. So run a value stream map and work out in your company, make a visual, it's ideally in a physical wall, of how the value flows through the company from the customer to delivering value to the customer. Once you see the value, you can look at those wait times, you can look at those constraints and those bottlenecks, and you can observe those challenges. When you see those challenges, those pain points, you can then look at action points you can do to identify. And you could prioritize an improvement backlog to say, this is an easy fix and it would be quite a big change to the improvement in flow if we do it. So then this is what the value stream consultant does, is assist the organization to self-organize how to improve their own value stream. And we do this by visualizing the constraints and the cues within the value stream. We create an improvement backlog, and in that improvement backlog, we need to prioritize because we need to continue to keep improving. When we create the improvement backlog, is a pre-planning process of creating the improvement backlog. And so there is a playbook that we demonstrate in our workshop, and you can then start the process of improving value realization by the customer. One challenge is not to overwhelm the customer by only having incremental change. So just like an incremental product, we don't want to do all of the change all at once. So personally, I try and avoid the use of the word transformation because it should be more transitional. And I use Kaizen as a technique, which is from Japanese, means change for good or change for the better. But Kaizen, the essence of Kaizen is very small incremental changes. There will be some preset approaches and some fixes that almost every company can look at and do straight away. And maybe they would be good starting points. But beyond that, there'll be some customization, which will be specific to your context. So we would create an improvement backlog and it will be based on the value stream map that we've created. And there would be somebody who would be accountable to that improvement backlog, just like you have a product owner who's accountable to the product backlog. So we start with the primary insights. We see which ones are causing the biggest problems. We delay the ones where there's delay or not in scope, or the ones which are not in scope or people are not ready. We don't do those. And it's very important not to exceed cognitive overload. So there's going to be a consumption rate of change that your organization can accommodate. And if you try and go faster than that, that's not a sustainable pace, and it's going to fall off the rails. So I'd encourage you to have a backlog. And just like we minimize the work in process, it's best to minimize the change in process. Because then when we make the change, we can also discern if that change has actually helped. If we're changing lots of things all at once, we don't know if we're going to help. And therefore, we want to consider using minimum viable changes. And I'm just going to define what an MVC is. And we need to determine a pace for implementation. Some companies may have greater capacity to change than others. It depends on your context. If you're in a crisis, you may have to change more rapidly. Obviously, in the last 12 months, we've recognized that we've had to change more rapidly working from home around the world than we would have otherwise changed maybe 5 years ago. So the pace is going to be dependent on your context. So this improvement backlog is designed to be a platform that a consultant uses and to which they add their own experience. And the idea of the consultant is they bring guidance to bear with their experience in other contexts. So a consultant is often an external person to the organization. An internal consultant may not see the dysfunction in the same kind of way. And this is a role I've fulfilled for a few years, although I'm only now codifying it through Flex. So what is a minimum viable change? Well, the book reference here is Lean Change Management, Innovation Practices for Managing Organizational Change by John Little. And that's the minimum viable change. It is the smallest possible change that moves us forward in the change plan we're adopting. And therefore, the essence is Kaizen there. An example of an MVC could be, look, we're pulling in work and we can't finish it because we didn't know the UI was ready or something like that. So perhaps we create a definition of ready and we don't start work until it meets that TQM checkpoint of ready. And we agree that once we have one, we start by agreeing we'll have a problem statement. Maybe we add a requirement that we look at a customer experience. So all of these are MVCs, and we want to try and have as small a change as possible so that we can benefit and realize that change as soon as possible. Just in the same way as we deliver value to the customers as soon as possible, we want to deliver value of change to ourselves as soon as possible. MVCs enable us to control the pace of change. So an MVC is limiting the batch size of change. The Flex approach is therefore enables organizations to start off with a fit-for-purpose approach. It avoids being simplistic while not being overcomplicated. So to quote Einstein, try and make everything as simple as possible, but no simpler. Its starting analysis methods provides the basis for an organization to keep improving. And that's what we need to do in every industry and in every company. Always have time, that Kaizen mindset, to continually improve. That's where you retain and enhance your business agility. And with that,
it takes 2 days to upload that as per our standard SOP. So you will see the recording in a mail which will be sent to you. Also, the claim code for this also will be sent in a mail to you. Yeah,
cool. So I've just got a few more slides here. One is ProThoughts Solutions have many project management webinars, and I'd encourage you to check them out. And there'll be a series of disciplined agile ones, I assume. She should know better than me on that. So yeah, keep following these webinars. If you've got any feedback from me or any thoughts, I'm more than willing to talk to any of you. I really do welcome trying to understand if I'm conveying it in the right kind of way. So there's a LinkedIn group with ProThoughts introducing Disciplined Agile Certification Prep as a LinkedIn group. And there's even a Senior Scrum Master certification training at the end of June and in July during the weekend. And so you're an ATP with a PMI, as we are as well. And there's more information on ProThoughts. And with that, I would like to say thank you to everybody for your indulgence of listening to me today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, I'm just putting the LinkedIn group, which I put it wrong. Okay, so I'm putting in the chat session. Just 1 second. So this is the wrong group. This is the correct group for all. Okay, so you can actually join that LinkedIn group on certification prep. Even we have people like Mark Lyons and Scott Ambler in the group, and they also provide even Al Shaloway. So that's something which we have started for certification prep, and we only update on the knowledge part there. So great. Okay. The next line, the first group is the wrong one. The second group is the right one. Sorry about the pop-up. And I would like to end saying thank you so much, Gareth. Okay, you are coming in a chilly winter. So we are having a summer here, okay, or a monsoon here in India. So thank you so much at coming at an odd time. And that was a wealth of knowledge that you have shared with all of us. So we are indebted to you, and we look forward for Disciplined Agile, value stream, getting the buzz more and more as the day passes. Okay, thank you so much, and thank you all of you, okay, for attending the session. I hope it was useful and valuable to all of you. Thank you.